This meeting is being recorded.
It should now.
It does, yes.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll just go briefly back to the title page for the recording and then I'll move on. So as everyone probably is aware, bullying and harassment is quite a big topic at the moment, especially over the past few years. And I think this has in parts to do with the fact that the academic community, including, editors and funders and university leadership, and of course, many scholars, are trying to make academia more inclusive and diverse and safe. And it's not really working out so well as of yet. So what we know about harassment in terms of how it is related to inequality in academia is that it's mutually reinforcing powers, right? So harassment facilitates inequality and inequality facilitates harassment. So actually, if we want to make academia a more equal place, we need to tackle harassment. But we know by now from systematic reviews that interventions in harassment, anti-harassment policies, etc., have actually had little discernible effect over the past 30 years. And then, so if you talk to university leaders in particular, the reasons that you will often hear is, yeah, but change takes such a long time and people have this unconscious bias. And back in the day, we did things differently. And surely, more money, more confidential advisors, more ombudspersons, more statements and codes of conduct and whatever will lead to the necessary cultural change. But the consequences of this ongoing policy ineffectiveness is basically that bullying, harassment, and power abuse prevail. And they also affect specific groups in the academy more than others. So there are specific groups that are being put down and pushed out of academia, and inequality is thereby maintained and reproduced. And one of the things that myself and some colleagues are now increasingly saying more loudly is that the focus on unconscious bias and on stereotypes is one of the things that, as a blind spot in our analysis, contributes to this ongoing policy ineffectiveness. So we're basically, in everything we do, in all the initiatives, in all the policies, we sort of totally neglect the fact that powerful actors in the academic system benefit from the inequality, and that they also can be expected to engage in deliberate attempts to preserve their power and their privilege. And we think that this blind spot indeed prevents effective policy and also prevents effective enforcement of the policy. So over the past 2 years, we have published a lot of short correspondences, short letters, but also some empirical research. One of the last was a letter in FEPS, where we're saying, okay, we need to really to break the silence around academic harassment. We need much more awareness. And one of the things that are lacking at the moment still is that scientific misconduct is typically associated with questionable research practices, so bad science. And people are not looking so much into how people are treated. But so if you think about bullying as repeated attempts to discredit, destabilize, or instill fear in targets, then you can imagine that this also is associated with bad science. And I will say a bit more about what we know from research about this association in a couple of minutes. Bullying, like if you look at it in general, right, can range from overt abuse to subtle acts that erode the confidence, reputation, and progress of the victim, and is closely related to harassment and discrimination. I personally don't really make this distinction. So when I talk about bullying, I basically include harassment and discrimination, while I am aware that there are differences. And what's interesting is that we find in academic settings specific types of bullying, which have been coined scientific sabotage. And that is a term that I have been reading about first 2019 in a report that was commissioned by the Dutch network of female professors. And they conducted more than 50 interviews with females working in Dutch science. What they find is a lot of behaviors that directly obstruct people's work as scientists and their careers. And in the scientific workplace, this included refusals of promotion, denial of tasks or functions needed for promotion, right? So when you need management experience in order to be promoted, but your line manager will never give you the opportunity to conduct management tasks, unjustified authorships, subordinating people in assigning management and research tasks, but also making people's work, ideas, and expertise invisible, blocking their access to spaces, documents, objects, or information, labeling them incompetent. And we've also seen physical and financial destruction of people's research projects. So this is specific to the academic workplace. So what my colleague Morteza Mahmoudi and I wrote about in the Nature correspondence that sort of exploded was that people will often say that scientists who engage in these practices are bullies despite being star academics. And that somehow they attribute these people's misbehaviors to a sort of unfortunate decoupling between being a good scientist and being a decent person. And interestingly, just last month, we had, again, a huge scandal in the Netherlands. So I'm just referring to last month's example to illustrate this really, really nicely. So at the University of Leiden, an astronomy professor was removed after showing extremely undesirable behavior. The name of the professor was initially not reported, so by now his name is known. It was also unclear which institute and faculty he was involved with, and he was suspended since the start of the committee's investigation. So the executive board of the university decided that he would not be allowed to return, that he cannot supervise PhD candidates or use any facilities provided to professors. And what they are saying, and here you see again that these scandals drag on for a long, long time, usually, because the institutions just don't act quickly. What they say is we are deeply saddened by the fact that these complaints have persisted for so long and that this behavior has been able to cause harm to so many people. But what they also say is, so although this professor has been shown by an external report that he showed a systematic pattern of slander, abuse of power, gender discrimination, public humiliation, threat of damage to the complainant's professional careers, even engaged in sexually charged and unwanted physical approaches, they would still say that the committee has also found that the academic integrity of this professor is indisputable, and hence there are no grounds to strip him of his professorship. So that means we are somehow saying that people can be great scientists and really horrible bullies, and this is really, really, really strange. And I'm not even going to dive into the fact that this person, cannot work anymore, but keeps their full salary, which is outright ridiculous. But so people typically believe that you can somehow tell the scientist from the person. And what Morteza and I did in this correspondence to Nature was challenging this assumption. So we are basically saying, based on literature and research that we have from the past years, we know from academics who have experienced bullying that they often describe patterns that suggest that bullying is a means for mediocre scientists to rise to the top. It's not the case that star academics are these socially inept, poor nerds. It's oftentimes people who would never have become academic stars if they hadn't engaged in years, sometimes decades of bullying. So this is the key argument that we're making in this correspondence. And excuse me.
I have a brief question. Some people are
Yes.
asking whether you have. Is it intentional that you're still sticking with the first slide because people can't see any slides apart from the first one?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's not. Can you see my slides now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
And do you also see it big enough that you can follow it?
For me, it's okay. I don't know. How about the others? Is that okay? Size okay?
Let's see, I can make it a bit bigger,
Yeah.
maybe. Now that's the problem.
Perfect.
Is that good?
Yes, that's
So
good.
I'm sorry about that, but we'll upload, I guess, the PDFs of the slides so you can read about this. And I'm also in the slides providing all the links to the literature. So if you're interested in that, you can find it there. So, but coming back to this argument that we're making about why is it why is it rational or reasonable to assume that that it's mediocre people that engage in bullying? So and why do these people rise to the top? So at this point in time, we're sort of making our argument or constructing our argument around two bigger issues, two bigger aspects. One is the need to get rid of competition. Not all academics feel the need to get rid of competition. People who are confident in their capabilities and skills will not feel that need. And this aligns with an emerging body of research that suggests that it's mediocre people in particular, or poor performing people in whatever context, that resort to bullying in order to remove their competition. So for instance, in the context of computer gaming, experimental research has shown that when male hierarchies are disrupted by women, this incites hostile behavior specifically from poorly performing men, because they stand to lose the most from these women that now enter the hierarchy. And we know the same kind of dynamics from Sipper quotas in Swedish political parties, where Sipper quotas, so one man, one woman, one man, one woman, basically led to an exodus of poorly performing men from the party. So basically, you can imagine that in academia, the lack of creativity and imagination forces mediocre academics to free ride on better performing peers for publications and grant proposals and PhD supervision. But that also means that better performing peers and junior colleagues or even students make very likely targets of bullies and become the target of career sabotage. So this is something to keep in mind. The next or the second bigger aspect that we were thinking about was the need for power, status, and dominance. I know that Daniel likes this topic a lot because he's a personality psychologist, where we see, the question is, so why, if you are performing poorly, right, in any kind of working environment, why would you still strive to go to the top, right? Why would you not sort of keep a low profile and hide away a bit? And I think this is where the dark triad personality type comes into this equation, right? Where we know by now that the hyper-competitive academic environment basically offers a survival benefit for people who are bold, dominant, mean, and disinhibited. So basically people who on the dark triad, show personality traits associated with narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. And we know of these traits that they are not only associated with that people want to attain power, status, and dominance, but also that they are bullies. For instance, by routinely overstating their own achievements while they are belittling those of their colleagues, or planting false stories to harm the reputation of colleagues, insulting or tarnishing the achievement of colleagues, etc. So basically, academic culture incentivizes people who are sort of predisposed for bullying by their personality type. And the interesting thing now, and this is coming back to this argument, so why would you say that someone can be a brilliant scientist and a bully? The dark triad personality traits are also clearly associated with bad science. So for instance, one qualitative analysis based on case histories of academics who were found guilty of research misconduct suggests that certain personality profiles, namely those of the dark triad, are more common among fraudsters, and they find also a relationship between publication pressure and research misconduct. So here you also see how the academic environment sort of facilitates these relationships. And Tiding and colleague, for instance, show among biomedical scientists that narcissistic and psychopathic traits are more common in higher academic ranks, which they interpret as indicating that these personality traits offer a kind of survival benefit in academia. And last but not least, psychopathy and personality disorders are also strongly related to interpersonal and counterproductive work behavior, such as aggression and bullying and other undesirable behaviors. And we have a person in the Netherlands, Iris Breedveld, who is publishing very, very good stuff on this, but unfortunately most of it in Dutch. But as she suggested in one radio interview that while the prevalence of psychopathy in the general population is around 3%, if I remember it correctly, this can be as high as 30% in academic leadership positions, which is quite astonishing. And so basically, so if you look at the individual level dynamics, so where you have this mediocrity which interacts with a dark triad personality, and you see, if you just look at the left-hand side, that these people try to take over powerful positions and networks and then attract better performing scholars in order to gloss over their own incompetence and exploit these others for their own benefit. And that they then contain the competition by sort of sabotaging their careers, so what is known as putting people down, keep them in a low salary scale, never give them promotion, just keep them on the line. Or if these people complain, they risk that they are being removed by bullying and being pushed out. If you look at the right-hand side, what I find very interesting is that the organizational interests, not only is the organizational structure, because it's so hierarchical and people are so dependent on just a few powerful people, which facilitates these individual level dynamics, but the organizational, let's say, benefits, or what the organizational aspirations align with what these individuals do. So attracting good performing researchers, attracting researchers or scholars who, are visible, who get grant money, who publish well, is of course facilitating the reputation of the institution as well. If you keep them down, so what we call career sabotage, if you keep them small, the institution also benefits because it gets cheap labor, it can exploit these people, it keeps them in dependent positions. And when this competition is removed, basically this is also preventing reputation damage for the organization because it protects the perpetrator. And in many cases, sort of prevents scandal because people are so intimidated that they will never talk about what happened to them. So basically, once academics who simultaneously feel entitled and undeserving at the same time rise to the top, they will cling on to power. This is a very well-known phenomenon in social psychology. We know that high-status individuals fear change just because they have more to lose than low-status individuals. So you get into this paradoxical situation where people need the better performing peers in order to keep up appearances, but they also detest these people because they make them look stupid. And then, so the best strategy to combine these conflicting motives is to have people on fixed-term contracts, fixed-term subsidized diversity programs. If you have vague promotion criteria, no accountability whatsoever, etc. So basically, what you could argue is that both the recruitment and the complaint procedures at universities are almost designed to serve the bullies' purposes. So I'm not saying they are designed like by malevolent power, but the system just works really well for bullies. So one of the things that I've been talking about in previous years was this all these initiatives to attract excellent women or excellent, you name it, underrepresented group members, junior scholars, Black scholars, scholars with disabilities, Indigenous people, you name it. And then these people would be attracted to universities, and the recruitment would normally be quite okay, but the retainment would be really, really bad because nobody actually wanted these people. And yeah, when they are really excellent, they constantly make others look stupid if you end up in such a situation, which of course are not the case everywhere, right? There are enough well-functioning groups in universities, of course. Another one, and I wanted to credit my student assistant Verena Kempken for this. She said, so we were talking about this other very big scandal from last month is KU Leuven, the Catholic University in Leuven in Belgium, where they have a university professor who for years and years has intimidated, groomed and harassed students. He was saying, for instance, to one of his victims that he's been getting blowjobs in exchange for good grades for years. And then Verena said, so this is of course also one possibility to get rid of potential competition right from the start. If you sort of harass students so that they never want to work in a university, you actually achieve the same thing. I've never thought about this that way, but I think it makes a lot of sense. So, and if you now combine this with the complaint procedures, I don't know how many of you are familiar or have any experience with complaint procedures in universities. If you want to report misconduct or harassment, you often see a kind of organized bureaucratic failure. We have like dozens of confidential advisors on all different levels of the university. We have faculty, D&I officers, central D&I officers, policy documents, per department, per institute, per faculty, on a central level again. And actually, I mean, where everybody is responsible, nobody is responsible. So you get this, what they call the great disappearance trick, right? You have a problem, you try to find someone who can help you, and nobody actually can help you. Everyone says, oh, but this is not my responsibility. You should be there, or you should be there, or you should be there. So I have come to think about the complaint procedure as what you see here, the game of whack-a-mole, basically as a means to identify potential threats to the system and to just render them harmless. We have by now a couple of studies showing empirically that HR, for instance, is actively silencing targets of harassment and encourages them not to come forward, or encourages them to self-silence. And people also report intimidation and isolation. And Sarah Ahmed calls this strategic inefficiency. And basically what you get with this organized bureaucratic failure is that bullies are protected by each additional hierarchical layer. And you get a sort of like an organized, systematic put down and push out of specific groups of people in the academy, leading basically to irrelevant science that is not much more than some kind of echo chamber of those in power. And because of this system, you just maintain and reproduce inequality and bullying. So basically, what we're seeing is, I would say, a race to the bottom. And I think it's because we are racing to the bottom faster and faster. I think that's the reason why more and more people actually become very vocal about this, which I really appreciate, and which is really good also for our understanding of what is actually happening, and is there anything we can do to change this. So basically, once they are at the top, what I call the mediocre and the mean hire and exploit the better performing scholars, but they only retain and promote those who are non-threatening, right? Who don't make them look bad, either because they don't perform well themselves or because they do not complain. And then you basically end up in some places in universities with a system that is only made up of mediocre scholars, cowards, and followers, and where we basically see that change is further prevented by, you know, this myth of unconscious bias. Oh, they didn't mean it that way. They've been socialized differently. But also the co-optation of important initiatives that are actually meant to change academia. And also things like the structural underfunding of academia, which really just keeps many people in dependent positions and undermines solidarity by keeping people constantly overworked. So nobody actually has the means, the time, and the resources to, you know, think about this system, reflect on it well. And with a couple of colleagues from different disciplines, we were trying to come up with some kind of, you know, advice to different stakeholders in higher education in a recent article. It's a short narrative review, trying to combine our insights from different perspectives, also from whistleblower retaliation, from corruption, from trauma psychology, etc., where we really come up with an entire table of advice for stakeholders in the higher education system. But you know how that goes. Nobody's reading it actually, so I don't know if anyone cares. But to wrap this up, with our paper, right, with this short correspondence piece, I think that Morteza and I succeeded in sort of starting a really nice and fruitful discussion in the academic community. We made a lot of impact with this. I've never had any publication making this kind of impact before. And I think that most people agreed with us. They said, yes, this is exactly what we see. This is exactly what happened to me, or I saw this happening to colleagues. It's horrible. And I think that if we ignore these power dynamics, right, and that powerful people in the academy actually benefit from preventing meaningful change, then we will keep racing to the bottom, and we will basically delegitimize the entire higher education sector, because the research and the knowledge that we produce and the education we offer to students are just not matching what is going on in society. It's not matching the plurality of people this world is made of. And on that note, I would I would be very curious to hear your thoughts on that. And also, if you want to engage in more, thorough exchange, please drop me an email. I'm happy to collaborate and discuss this. So thanks a lot. I'll stop sharing here.